Hey, we're going to finish the last chapter that we were in. We're at the end of chapter 47, and then we're going to go into chapter 48. Zebob continues the tale of Despero. Follow along with me. Remember where we were. The rat was trying to help Despero just to get a good feel for maybe getting to the princess. Botticelli did not really want to be of service. Far from it. You know really in his heart what Botticelli wanted. He wanted others to suffer. Why would you be like that? Specifically, he wanted the small the small mouse to suffer because he was a rat. And so how best to do that? We'll take him directly to what he wanted, the princess. Let him see what his heart desired. And then, and only then, faced with what he loved, would Despero die. And at the end of it all, how tasty the mouse would be, seasoned with hope and tears and flour and oil and thwarted love. My name, little friend, is Botticelli Ramorso, and you may trust me. You may trust me. Will you tell me your name? Despero Tilling, he said. Despero Tilling, take your paw from your weapon and come with me. Despero stared at him. Despero Tilling, take your paw from your weapon. Come, said Botticelli. Let go of your needle. Take hold of my tail. I will lead you to your princess. I promise. Do you think he's telling the truth? What, in your experience, is the promise of a rat really worth? That's right. Zero, zip, nada, nothing. Goose eggs. But I must ask you this question, too. What else was there for Despero to hold on to? You're right again, nothing. And so the mouse reached out, took a hold of the rat's tail, and off they went. All right, we're starting chapter 48 on the tail of a rat. Chapter 48. Have you ever had a chance to hold the tail of a rat? At best, it is a very unpleasant sensation. It's scaly and cold, similar to holding a small, narrow snake. At worst, when you are dependent upon a rat for your survival, and when a part of you is certain that you are being led nowhere except to your death, it is a hideous sensation, awful indeed, to have nothing but a rat's tail to cling to. Nonetheless, Despero held on to Botticelli Ramorso, and the rat led him deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into the dark dungeon. Despero's eyes had, by this point, adjusted quite well to the darkness. He could see much better now, though it would have been better if they had not, for the things he saw made him shiver and shake. What else did he see? Well, he saw the floor of the dungeon. It was littered with tufts of fur, knots of red thread, skeletons of other mice. Everywhere there were tiny white bones glowing in the darkness, and he saw in the dungeon tunnels, through which Botticelli led him, the bones of human beings too. There were grinning skulls and delicate finger bones rising up out of the darkness and pointing towards some truth best left unspoken. Despero closed his eyes. You can close your eyes. But it didn't help. Didn't help at all, because he saw those bones just as if his eyes were still open. Wide as the bones, the tufts of hair and the knots of thread and all of the despair. Even though his eyes were closed, he could still see them in his mind. Ha! Exactly, Botticelli laughed as he negotiated the twists and turns of the dungeon. Oh, yeah, exactly. If what was in front of Despero was too horrible to contemplate, what followed behind him was perhaps even worse. Rats. Lots of rats. Happy rats. Hungry rats. Vengeful parade of rats. Their noses up in the air, sniffing and sniffing. Mouse! Sang out one rat joyfully. Yeah, yeah, mouse indeed, said another. But something else too. Soup, called out another rat. Yes, soup, the others agreed. Blood, sang a rat. Blood, they all agreed together. And then they sang, here, mousy, mousy, mousy. Here, little mousy, mousy. Botticelli called out to the other rats. Mine, he said. This little treasure is all mine. Please, I beg you, do not infringe on my discovery. Mr. Remorso, said Despero. He turned and looked behind him and saw the rats, their red eyes and their smiling mouths. He closed his eyes again. He kept them closed this time. Mr. Remorso, he shouted. Yes, said Botticelli. Mr. Remorso, said Despero, as he was crying now. Couldn't help it. Please, please, the princess, please. Tears, shouted the rats. We smell tears, Mousie. We smell tears. Please, shouted Despero. Little friend, said Botticelli. Little Despero Tilling, I promised you I will keep my promise. The rat stopped. Look ahead of you, he said. What do you see? Despero opened his eyes. Light, he said. I see light. Exactly, said Botticelli. Light. Chapter 49. The title, What Do You Want, Megariso? Again, we must go backward before we go forward. We must consider for a moment what had occurred with the rat and the serving girl and the princess down in the dungeon before Despero made it down to the dungeon to them. What happened was this. Roscuro led the Pea and Mig deep into the dungeon to a hidden chamber, and there he directed Mig to put the princess in chains. Remember that? Gore, said Mig, she's going to have a hard time learning her lessons if she's all chained up like that. Do as I say, said Roscuro. Maybe, said Mig, before I lock her up, her and me could switch outfits so we could start in already with her being me and me being a princess. Oh, yes, said Roscuro. Certainly. Wonderful idea. Very wonderful. Miss Miggery, princess, take off all your crowns and give it to the serving girl instead. The Pea sighed and took off her crown and handed it to Mig, and Mig put it on and slid it immediately right down her small head and came to a rest quite painfully on her poor, abused ears. Crown was pretty big. It's a biggish thing, she said, and painful-like. Well, well, said Roscuro, how do I look? Mig asked, smiling at him. Ridiculous, he said, laughable. Mig stood, blinking back tears. You mean I don't look like a princess? She said to the rat. I mean, Roscuro, you will never look like a princess, no matter how big a crown you put on that tiny head. You look exactly like the fool you are and always will be. Now make yourself useful and chain the princess up. Dress up time is over. Well, Mig sniffed, wiped away tears from her eyes, and then bent to look at the pile of chains and locks on the floor. And now, princess, he said, I'm afraid the time for your truth has arrived. I will now tell you what your future holds, as you consign me to darkness, so I consign you too to a life spent in this dungeon. Mig looked up. Ain't she going upstairs to be a serving maid? No, said Roscuro. Ain't I going up to be a princess then? No, said Roscuro. But I want to be a princess. No one, said Roscuro, cares what you want. As you know, Megariso had heard this sentiment expressed many times in her short life. But now, in the dungeon, It hit her full force. The rat was right. No one cared what she wanted. No one ever cared. And perhaps worst of all, no one would ever care. "I want," cried Mig. "Shh," said the princess. "Shut up," said the rat. "I want," sobbed Mig. I want. What do you want, Mig?" the princess said softly. "Huh?" shouted Mig. "What do you want, Miggery-So?" the princess shouted. "Don't ask her that," said Roscuro. "Shut up, shut up." But it was too late. The words had been said. The question at last had been asked. The world stopped spinning and all of creation held its breath, waiting to hear what it was that Miggery-So actually wanted. "I want," said Mig. "Yes," shouted the pea. "I want my ma," cried Mig into the silent, waiting world. "I want my ma." "Oh," said the princess. She held out her hand to Mig. Mig took hold of it. "I want my mother too," said the princess softly, and she squeezed the hand of Mig. "Stop it," shouted Roscuro. "Chain her up, chain her up." "Gore," said Mig, "I ain't gonna do it. You can't make me." "You can't make me do it. I got the knife, don't I?" She took the knife and held it up. "If you have any sense at all," said Roscuro, "and I heartily doubt that you do, you will not use that instrument on me. Without me, you will never find your way out of the dungeon, and you will starve to death down here in the dungeon." "Gore," said Mig, "then lead us out now, or I will chop you up into little rat bits." "No," said Roscuro, "the princess shall stay here in the darkness, and you, Mig, will stay with her." "But I want to go upstairs," said Mig. "I'm afraid we are stuck here, Mig," shouted the princess, "unless the rat has a change of heart and decides to lead us out of the dungeon." "There will be no changes of heart," said Roscuro. "None." "Gore," said Mig. She lowered the knife. And so the rat and the princess and the serving girl sat together in the dungeon as outside the castle the sun rose and moved through the sky and sank to the earth again, and night fell. Another day passed. They sat together until the candle had burned out and another one had to be lit. They sat together in the dungeon, and they sat, and they sat, and they sat. And truthfully, they might still be sitting there if a mouse had not arrived. Chapter 50, in which the princess says his name. "Princess," Despero shouted, "Princess, I have come to save you." The Princess Pea heard her name. She looked up. "Despero," she whispered, and then she shouted it. "Despero!" Reader, nothing is sweeter in this sad world than the sound of someone you love calling your name. Nothing. For Despero, the sound was worth everything: his lost tail, his trip to the dungeon, and back out of it, and back in again. He ran toward the princess, but Roscuro, baring his teeth, blocked the mouse's way. The princess cried, "Oh no, Rat, please don't hurt him. He is my friend." Mig said, "Don't worry, princess. I will save the Misi." She took the kitchen knife. She aimed to cut off the rat's head, but she missed her mark. "Whoopsie," Miggery-So said. Chapter 51. What is that smell is the title. "Ow!" screamed Roscuro. He turned back at where his tail had been, and as he did, Despero drew his needle and placed the sharp tip of it right where the rat's heart should be, like a sword. "Don't move," said Despero. "I will kill you." "Ha!" Botticelli laughed from the sideline. "Exactly." He slapped his tail on the floor in approval. "Absolutely delightful. A mouse is going to kill a rat? Never." "All of this is much better than I anticipated. I love it when mice come to the dungeon." Here's a picture. "Let me see," said the other rats, pushing and shoving. "Stand back," Botticelli told him, still laughing. "Stand back. Let the mouse do his work." Despero held the trembling needle against Roscuro's heart. The mouse knew that as a knight, it was his duty to protect the princess. But would killing the rat really make the darkness go away? Despero bowed his head ever so slightly, and as he did so, his whiskers brushed against the rat's nose. Roscuro sniffed. What is that smell?" he said. "Mouse blood," shouted one rat. "Blood and bones," shouted another. "You're smelling tears," said Botticelli. "Tears and thwarted love." "Exactly," said Roscuro. "And yet, there's something else." He sniffed again, and the smell of soup crashed through his soul like a great wave, bringing with it the memory of light, the chandelier, the music, the laughter, everything, all the things that were not, would never, could never be available to him as a rat. "Soup!" moaned Roscuro, and he began to cry. "Boo-hoo-hoo!" shouted Botticelli. "Sss!" hissed the other rats. "Kill me!" said Roscuro. He fell down before Despero. "It will never work. All I wanted was some light. That's why I brought the princess here, really just for some beauty, some light of my own." "Please," shouted Botticelli, "do kill him. He is a miserable excuse for a rat." "No, Despero," said the princess. "Don't kill him." Despero lowered his needle. He turned and looked at the pea. "Boo!" shouted Botticelli again. "Kill him, kill him, kill him. All this goodness is making me sick. I've lost my appetite." "Gore!" shouted Mig, waving her knife. "I'll kill him." "No, wait," said the princess. "Roscuro," she said to the rat. "What?" Tears were falling out of his eyes and creeping down his whiskers and dripping onto the dungeon floor. And then the princess took a deep breath and put the hand to her heart. I think she was feeling the same thing that Despero had felt when he was faced with his father begging him for forgiveness. That is, P was aware suddenly of how fragile her heart was. How much darkness was inside of it, fighting always with the light. She did not like the rat. She would never, ever like the rat. But she knew what she must do to save her own heart. And so, here are the words that the princess spoke to her enemy. She said, "Roscuro, would you like some soup?" And the rat sniffed. "Don't torment me," he said. "I promise you," said the princess, "that if you lead us out of here, I will get cook to make you some soup, and you can eat it in the banquet hall." "Speaking of eating," shouted the rats, "give us the mousie." "Yes," shouted another, "hand over the mouse." "Who would want him now?" said Botticelli. "The flavor of him will be ruined." "All that forgiveness and goodness. Blech. I, for one, am leaving." "Soup in the banquet hall?" Roscuro asked the princess. "Yes," said the pea. "Really?" "Truly, I promise." "Gore!" shouted Mig. "Soup is illegal." "But soup is good," said Despero. "Yes," said the pea. "Isn't soup good?" The princess bent down before the mouse. "You are my knight," she said to him, with a shining needle. "And I am so glad you found me. Let's go upstairs. Let's eat some soup." And they did.